In part one of the Marymount Hospital murders, I had reported that I was unable to find victim number 2, James Harvey Tyree, and that information sort of set in motion my old buddy Darrell Peters, who is a detective wannabe, gumshoe, online researcher, and he found a 1970 obituary in the Sentinel Liquid. He went to the public library, which is a place that I haven't been in quite a while, and he pulled up an old obituary, and it referenced the name of a cemetery, and he gave me that information, and we are now here in Rockcastle County. The name of the cemetery that they gave was Marler. It is no longer called the Marler Cemetery. Online, it is called the H.G. Sutton Cemetery. And it's supposed to be the final resting place of James H. Tyree. You can tell right away that it's extremely grown up. I don't think this thing's been mowed in years. I'm gonna look around here for a minute and see if we can find Mr. Tyree. This cemetery is a mess. Needs to be mowed. But after looking around, lo and behold, we now know the whereabouts of James H. Tyree. He, of course, passed away on May 31st, 1970, the day after victim number 1, Logan Evans, was killed by Donald Harvey on May 30th, and James H. Tyree the very next day on May 31st. So we found him. It's an old cemetery. A lot of old field stones, unmarked. There's the final resting place of victim number 2, James H. Tyree. Welcome to part 2 of Marymount Hospital murders, where we will take a look at victims number 9 through 15, starting out here in the McDaniel Cemetery. McDaniel Cemetery is located on Maple Grove Road. In fact, that's Maple Grove Road back toward 363, and this is the very back side of Reed Valley subdivision, Reed Valley Estates, the back side of it. Victim number 9 was Viola Wyan, age 63. She died at the hands of Donald Harvey on November the 4th, 1970. Victim number 9, Viola Wyan, came after William Bowling and Maud Nichols in August. And on November the 4th, Donald Harvey applied his handiwork to Miss Wyan. The faulty oxygen valve served Donald Harvey again on Viola Wyan. She was 63 and suffering from leukemia and electrolyte imbalance. Donald Harvey decided that the time had come for her to die. He arranged the curtains around her bed to give him privacy, and he placed a wastebasket behind a partially closed door so that he would hear if anyone started to enter the room. He avoided the use of a pillow because he had learned that sometimes in suffocation that fibers from pillows are present in the lungs. So as he was tucking a piece of plastic into place, he heard a noise. By the time a nurse had entered and pulled back the curtain, the bag was out of sight. He said, "Oh, I'm just finishing up." He tugged at the corner of the sheet and left the room. Later, he returned to the room with the faulty oxygen valve, and he exchanged it for the one that was in use. Harvey was not present when Viola Wyan died, but it was his job to remove the oxygen equipment from the room. Again, he replaced the tag on the bad valve and returned it to the storage room. Viola Wyan, November 4th, 1970. December the 7th, 1970 would be Donald Harvey's next victim. This is the West London Cemetery, sometimes called Bray, B-R-A-Y, Bray, West London. Final resting place of victim number 10, Margaret Harrison. Margaret Harrison was 91 years old and hospitalized following a heart attack. Marymount was feeding her with a baby bottle, a sight that was upsetting to Donald Harvey. He was saddened to see this woman's return to infant behavior. So Harvey came up with a new idea. He gave her an overdose of morphine, Demerol, and codeine that was intended for another patient. Then he monitored her heartbeat with a stethoscope until her pulse rate dropped to 0 and she stopped breathing. December the 7th, 1970, Margaret Elizabeth Harrison. Victim number 10. This is the Barnesburg Cemetery in Pulaski County. The final resting place of victim number 11, Sam Carroll. Sam would be the first victim of the new calendar year, 1971, and the first of 5 victims in 1971. When Donald Harvey confessed of his crimes in 1987, he told the authorities that he felt sorry for Sam Carroll. Sam was an 80-year-old man with pneumonia and had an obstruction in his small intestine. Donald Harvey felt like Sam Carroll was suffering too much and decided to put an end to it. Although Carroll was conscious and could talk, Harvey didn't discuss that decision with him. Again, Donald Harvey took the faulty oxygen valve from the storage room and replaced the valve with the one that was in use. Deprived of oxygen, Sam Carroll soon died. January the 9th, 1971. Victim number 11, Sam Carroll. This is A.R. Dyke Cemetery, downtown London. Final resting place of Maggie Rawlings, which is victim number 12. She died on January the 15th, 1971. Maggie had been hospitalized for treatment of a bad burn on her arm caused by falling on an open grate. Donald Harvey smothered her with a pillow, but he put a plastic bag between her face and the pillow in order to avoid any fibers in her airways. Mrs. Rawlings' son operated a funeral home. She was the mother of Gus Rawlings, the grandmother of Wilson Rawlings. So that made him a little more cautious about the possibility of detection, but it was not detected until he confessed to it in 1987, 16 years later, over 16 years later. Maggie Rawlings, January 15th, 1971. Victim number 13 is Mr. Silas Buttner, who is resting in peace here at the McKee Cemetery in downtown London. It's at the end of Balsinger Street. Silas Buttner was killed by Donald Harvey 8 days after Maggie Rawlings. And Donald Harvey thought Silas Buttner, a 62-year-old man with kidney problems, was not being cared for properly by the women on the staff at Marymount because Silas was African American. He tried to end Buttner's suffering by smothering him on several occasions, but he was interrupted each time. So he fell back on his old familiar process and used the old trusty faulty oxygen valve. And then he became concerned that his role in Buttner's death might be discovered because there was an autopsy. But the true cause of death was not detected and would not be known until 1987, when Harvey confessed. As a footnote, I believe Lillian Buttner was a retired school teacher who taught at Altamont. It was a segregated school for black children at Altamont Crossing down in East Bernstead. I believe Lillian Buttner was a teacher there. Silas Buttner, January 27th, 1971. This is A.R. Dyke Cemetery. Final resting place of victim number 14, John V. Combs. John was 68 years old. Donald Harvey considered John Combs, who had a bad heart and had difficulty breathing. Harvey considered him to be a nice man in distress. Combs was in a private room. Harvey tried to smother him with a plastic bag using a stethoscope to monitor his heartbeat, but he was unsuccessful. So once more, he used the faulty oxygen valve as his instrument of death, and later in 1987 described Combs' death as a mercy killing. John V. Combs, January 26th, 1971. Back at A.R. Dyke Cemetery in downtown London for victim number 15, the very last victim of Marymount Hospital, Milton Sasser. After the death of John Combs on January the 26th, it was about a month and a half before Donald Harvey killed again. And his last victim, his next victim and last victim, was Milton Bradley Sasser. Well, I should say his last victim at Marymount Hospital. Milton Bradley Sasser was a 90-year-old man with congestive heart failure. Donald Harvey gave him an overdose of morphine that he stole from the medicine cabinet at the nurse's station. Harvey then made a mistake of trying to dispose of the hypodermic needle in the toilet, stopping it up. A maintenance man at the hospital discovered the needle in the toilet. However, no one recognized a connection between the hypodermic needle and Sasser's death. Milton Bradley Sasser, the last murder by Donald Harvey at Marymount Hospital, March the 14th, 1971. Sasser was a veteran of the Spanish-American War. "13 days after the death of Milton Sasser, Donald Harvey quit Marymount Hospital. According to the book and according to his admissions, he didn't kill again until May the 1st of 1983, or at least that's the date he confessed to in 1987 when he got caught. Is it likely that Harvey went from 1971 until 1983 without killing anyone else? I would say that is very unlikely. But the next death he caused that he admitted to was in 1983 at a hospital known as Providence Hospital in Cincinnati. I'd like to take a few minutes here just to do a little recap of the 15 victims of Donald Harvey at Marymount Hospital. After the last murder on March the 14th, 1971, Donald Harvey left Marymount and London by the end of March. In 1971 and 72, Harvey spent 9 months in the Air Force. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and then back to his hometown of Boonville. By 1975, he was working at the VA in Cincinnati as a nurse's assistant and as a janitor. His time at the VA was spent between facilities in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and Cincinnati. When he was captured in 1987, Donald Harvey confessed to 5 incidents that occurred in the early 80s, incidents that led to the deaths of others, but he was not convicted of them. He admitted to poisoning 24 people and causing their deaths at Drake Hospital. He knowingly committed 36 murders, but has admitted to up to 47 deaths for sure. He faced 7 charges of attempted murder. Out of 15 deaths at Marymount Hospital, he was convicted of 9 by Laurel Circuit Court. On March the 28th of 2017, Donald Harvey was beaten in a North Ohio prison by another inmate. He died 2 days later, on March the 30th of 2017, from his injuries. That death occurred nearly 47 years after his first murder victim. Inmate James Elliott, age 44, was charged with Harvey's death. Elliott, who had ties to Knox and Whitley counties, had heard of Harvey while he was growing up in southeastern Kentucky. When he was asked why he beat Harvey to death, Elliott replied, "That one's for the people back home."